In 1707, Scotland stopped being a country. Not because it lost a war, not because it was invaded. It simply ran out of money, bankrupted by a single, catastrophic bet, placed on a strip of jungle on the far side of the world that most Scots would never see. And to this day, no one fully agrees on whether that bet failed on its own or whether it was allowed to. In the 1690s, Scotland was poor, and it was watching. England, the Dutch, the Spanish. Every rival was growing rich on overseas colonies and trade routes that circled the globe. Scotland had none of it. Then a man named William Paterson offered a way in. Paterson was a financier, brilliant, persuasive, and strangely, one of the men who had just helped found the Bank of England. He had a plan to make Scotland the center of world trade in a single stroke. The plan was a place, Darién, a stretch of coast on the Isthmus of Panama, the narrow bridge of land where the Atlantic and the Pacific come closest to touching. Control that crossing, Paterson argued, and you control the flow of goods between two oceans. Every ship, every cargo, every fortune moving between east and west would have to pass through Scottish hands. On paper, it was genius, and the whole nation believed it. This wasn't a king's gamble or a single company's risk. Ordinary Scots, merchants, widows, farmers, lords, poured their savings into it. By the time the money was counted, as much as a quarter of all the wealth in Scotland had been staked on this one venture. A country had bet itself. In 1698, 5 ships left the harbor at Leith, carrying about 200 colonists, a year of supplies, and the hopes of a nation. They named their new colony New Caledonia. They believed they were sailing toward the future. They were sailing into a trap. Darién was not the crossroads of the world. It was a swamp. The heat was unbearable. The rain never stopped. And almost immediately, the fever came. Malaria and dysentery tore through the camp, killing as many as 10 people a day. The food they brought rotted. The goods they had packed to trade with the world, combs, wigs, heavy wool cloth, were worthless in a tropical jungle. And the help they were counting on never came. The English colonies in the America were ordered, by their own king, to give the Scots nothing. No food, no shelter, no trade. England did not want to provoke Spain, who claimed the land as theirs. So the Scots were left alone, starving, surrounded. Within 8 months, the survivors abandoned the colony. Fewer than 300 of the original settlers lived to sail home. And they returned just days after a second fleet. Another wave of hopeful colonists had already set out for the same doomed shore. That second colony fell too, this time by a Spanish siege. By the end, more than 2,000 Scots were dead, and nearly every ship was gone. But the bodies were only half the loss. The money was gone, and it had been the nation's money. Scotland was, simply, broke, and a broke country has very little room to say no. Which is when England made an offer. A union. One parliament, one kingdom. And in exchange, England would repay the Darién investors nearly every pound they had lost. To a ruined Scottish elite, it was a lifeline. To many ordinary Scots, it was a bribe. In 1707, the Scottish Parliament voted to dissolve itself, and Scotland, as an independent nation, ceased to exist. Great Britain was born. The poet Robert Burns would later write that his country had been bought and sold for English gold. And here's the question that has never quite gone away. England had refused to help. England had ordered its colonies to turn the Scots away. And England, in the end, was the one nation that walked away from Darién with exactly what it wanted. A Scotland too broken to stand alone. Maybe it was only a disaster, Maybe a poor country reached too far and paid for it. But the empire that would go on to rule a quarter of the planet began, in part, in the fever swamps of Panama, on the grave of the country that dreamed it first. Scotland gambled its independence on a jungle. It never got it back.